here I'd like to draw largely from Laura Smithers' work, who's at the University of Oregon. And she is interested in students in bridge programs in higher education and how to not just think about what's the best way to serve folks, but she deals with this idea on which path to best practice and the multiple ontologies of students. So when you think about that term, which path to best practice, and you really think about it, it's very strange, because best practice should have a path if it is the best, right? But to think which path to best practice can honor these multiple ontologies that are operating at the same time. Laura quotes Karen Barad saying, "We are responsible for the world of which we are a part, not because it is an arbitrary construction of our choosing, but because reality is sedimented out of particular practices that we have a role in shaping and through which we are shaped." Laura asks, what are we making reality in practice to be? And in what ways can we make reality differently? She's rethinking the neoliberal student, providing us with what she calls a diffractive reading of students in transition, where students are read through that activity rather than reading on the activity. And she thinks of students as ontologically multiple. To begin with, and she starts with what she calls secondly, that researchers are always beginning secondly, taking over stories. We cannot escape the fact that we take over the stories of those whom with we work. And so to think about that is to begin with rather to begin with the achievement gap and not white supremacy, right? And that's the danger of acting secondly. To think of the decline of tenure as opposed to the subordination of all value systems to economic means of production. So posthumanism, Laura puts forward, as a flattened monist system, starts with practices, assemblages, entanglements. It is not mind or matter. It is not subject or object, but rather assemblage. And to measure within an assemblage is to enact boundaries. It's to create. We can never say that a student is. The student changes in each measurement, not as a combination of multiple identities or experiences, but as inseparable from the assemblage, from each assemblage. And to be clear, I am quoting and paraphrasing very freely from Laura's work here. These are not my ideas. She moves on to talk about how can we then think through ideas like resistance. And she's interested in looking at attributing resistance to persons, individuals, that is, humans. She suggests perhaps is to ignore the influence of matter, like cell phones, like tablets, other zoe, the bios, family backgrounds, etc. So she would like us to start somewhere else, secondly. Smithers wants to start with the N, the whole, the assemblage. She wants to subtract what is unique and map the folding in of her own boundary-making practices as the inquirer, as the researcher, marking bodies and representing the fluidity of lines around the constructed subject. And this is a non-identitarian notion of doing research on folks we might consider students in our everyday vernacular. So Smithers is interested in generating new kinds of questions, taking cues from Alicia Jackson and Lisa Mazzei's Thinking with Theory in Qualitative Research. So she asks instead, how do remarks of some women work to produce resistance in a summer bridge program? How does technology use during discussion by participants in the room work to produce resistance? How does silence in discussion around monikers like queer versus gay work to produce resistance? These are not typical social science questions. These are questions that look at the assemblage, the activity, as the unit. So from posthumanism, Smithers suggests that researchers get to create reality constituting boundaries. Conscientiously is the opportunity available to us.